Hello, world. Welcome to another exciting and super fun episode of the Little Bit Different podcast with your host, Cory Sterling. Hi, that's me. I hope everyone is doing fantastic and enjoying the present moment wherever they are, whatever's around you, whatever you're doing. I hope that it's a good one and that you're enjoying it and that you're having fun. So the topic for today's podcast is going to be the little bit different way of getting to financial abundance. And I'm super excited to chat about this because it's something that I've experienced myself. I've gone through this whole process and that I'm about to share with you. And I'm really excited to tell my story and share about the important things that I've learned. And it also happens to be that last night I was hanging out with a friend. We were going for a walk in Jericoacoara National Park here in Brazil. And it was just so striking. It was so obvious. Like I had so much important information to share with my friend that I really felt was spot on. And we were just talking and I was telling her all these things. I was like, this conversation has to be more than just me and her having a chat. And so that really is what prompted me to take some time today and to record my story and record my thoughts. And so the first thing that I'll say is just that this is a different approach. How I live my life is different. How I've been able to arrive to financial freedom and financial abundance is different. I certainly can't promise that what I'm saying is going to work for you, but this is an example of something that has worked for me. And it's also something that I've observed in my other friends who are at a point of financial abundance and financial freedom, that a lot of the principles or the stories or the things that I'm going to talk about I've seen espoused in them and I've seen them embody and live these different things. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is obviously a disclaimer. I'm not a financial coach. I don't think that I ever will be. That's not really my calling. I don't feel super drawn to it. So, and any actions you take are obviously your responsibility, but definitely I think enjoying the resources that I mentioned and speak about will be really, really helpful. And then the other thing just about financial freedom and financial abundance is that I call it financial freedom and financial abundance, and I don't call it getting rich or being rich. And I think that's just more of a personal distinction for me, that I don't see myself as being rich, or my other friends who live in financial abundance and have financial freedom. I don't see them as being rich. And that's just the way that I've always looked at it. It's the way that I understand how the process works, and words that I'm more comfortable with. But if rich is a word that feels better for you, you can totally go for it. Before I dive in and share a little bit about my story, I also want to just make the following disclaimer. I've been through different points of my life where I haven't had any money, where as an entrepreneur, where I've had $0, where I've been in debt. And there have been moments where I've had a lot of money in the form of cash. Like I've just had accounts filled, overflowing with too much cash that I really had no idea what to do with. And it's so important to remember that the joy and fulfillment and happiness in life can never be purchased. So this is, for me, the first point of talking about money and financial freedom is that it's a tool. It's something that will bring you more of what you already are. If you're a good person and a kind person and a generous person, and you have more money and you find yourself into more money and you build a life around having more money, you'll probably just become more generous and kinder and all of those things. And conversely, if you have a lot of problems, if you're always fighting, if you look at whatever it is, money will probably bring more of that as well. So that should be really comforting for all of us to know, right? That we can be happy without money. We can be happy with money. And usually money will bring us more and demonstrate to us more of who we actually are. But money does not equal happiness. And there have been several instances in my life where I've had a lot of money and I haven't been in a good place mentally. I've been upset, I've been sad, I've been disappointed. And sometimes it's like, I've said to myself many times, like I would trade all this money that I have to feel fulfilled or to feel satisfied or to feel whatever feeling it is that I was searching for. And as time has gone on, again, what makes sense to me is that money is a tool. Money is a tool that we can use for better or for worse. And it mostly, what to me in my relationship with money just provides a much more comfortable lifestyle. And if one can live a life without financial pressure, you're alleviating probably 85% of the pressures that we feel in our life. So I think it really makes sense, and it's really worthwhile to take some time and dive into this. So where do we want to start? The most important thing that I think it's important for us to know about getting on a path to financial freedom and financial abundance is that most of how you are currently operating is based on some form of belief system that you have around money and some form of subconscious programming that you have in your mind about money. Money's a really, really, really big part of our lives. And there's probably something that happened to you, maybe when you were a child, maybe when you started your first business as an entrepreneur, or when you were younger, or this or that, or whatever it was. But it's so important to note that the work really about this, the work is just firstly fixing your mind about money. That's absolutely totally what is required. Because once you're able to fix your mind around money, and once you're able to start telling a new story, and once you're able to reprogram old beliefs or old traumatic stories or experiences that you have, that's when everything will shift. It's not going to shift from this new opportunity or this new thing that's happening or that's going to happen. So, and the reason for me recording this today was chatting with my friend last night, who is let's just say is not in financial abundance, and maybe is in the opposite, is really, really struggling. And what I noticed with this friend, and some of the resources that I'm going to share today, and some of the books that I talk about, I was telling my friend, I was like, hey, like, you just read these books. Like, start by reading the books, and then that'll fix things. And this person she was so caught up in the moment. She's like, no, like, there's going to be this new opportunity, and then everything's going to change and all of that. But really, all that's going to happen is there's going to be a new opportunity, but your money story and your beliefs around money are just going to continue to run your life. So it may be that there's a great opportunity, but you're going to end up to some degree right back to exactly where you are, because you haven't set your mind straight about it. Really, financial abundance is about your mindset. It's about the work that you do. It's about the stories that you have. It's about the beliefs that you have. And it's about what you tell yourself about money. And that's the first and most important point that I just want to stress, because that's what I've learned in myself. That and I can look back and I'll tell a little bit about my story and my journey and where I've come from and how I started. But it's just so important to know that when my friend was saying, oh, well, there's this great new opportunity. And, I've heard the story many times. Oh, there's a new opportunity. This is going to be great. This is a new opportunity. And like, I'm an optimist. I believe I want it to be great for her. I want her to have everything that she wants. But what I was really trying to emphasize to her is like, stop, press pause on everything, build, refresh, grow, design, cultivate your money story and your money mindset. And once you do that, everything will take care of itself. Then when the opportunity comes, you'll really be able to, you will allow yourself to really thrive in that and to really build off of that. So that's the first point that I want to say. It's not about qualifications. It's not about what you've studied. It's not about what career you're in. To me, none of those things are really relevant. If you look at modern commerce in 2023, at the end of 2023, it used to be, oh, you need a great education and you need an office job and you need a pension and that's how you're going to make money. But in history, there have always been so many people outside of that way who find their own way to make it happen. But I think even now, even much more so, there's so many new and different avenues that one should not let academic qualifications or even just intelligence hold you back. It's really just about what your relationship with money is and what you allow in for yourself, and also partially how you value yourself and what you feel you deserve. So with all of that being said as a precursor, and again, me just emphasizing that in my experience with money and financial abundance, it's always been about mindset. And so my story is as follows. I grew up in a middle-class home. And I never lacked for anything at all. I was able to play hockey when I was a child. My parents were able to pay for me to play hockey and to go skiing and do lovely things. So it was great. And I was never surrounded by vast sums of wealth. I didn't really know or have friends who were really, really wealthy. It's like, I think as kids, we all remember like some people had really big houses and you would always love going to their houses. And I remember like when I would have a play date as a kid, my mom or my dad would be driving me in the car and you knew what number of the street it was on. I would just be like counting down, hoping that it was a big house. So obviously like there's some part of me that really loved it. And then I went through life and I got to a point where I was 19 or 20 where travel was absolutely the thing that mattered most to me. And I loved traveling and I loved being with other travelers, and I didn't have money. I was in university. So, I stayed in hostels. I always stayed in hostels, and sometimes I still stay in hostels, which is nice. But my self-identity of who I saw myself being in almost throughout all of my 20s, I always saw myself as being a traveler. And one of the things, a component that I saw in being a traveler was that travelers didn't really have money. I didn't, at that point in my circles, I didn't know any travelers who stayed in hotels. Probably throughout all of my 20s, like from 20 until my last day of being 29, I had a couple friends who had done really, really well. And sometimes if we were a group of buddies, we would go on a trip and we would all pitch in for a hotel. But I don't think in my 20s I ever really stayed in a hotel by myself one time. Like I just would always stay in hostels and big dorm rooms, and I love that. And there definitely was a part of me that thought that having money was not a good thing. I was like, oh, like, what are these people with money? And everyone who knows me personally, I spent a lot of years not wearing shoes because I loved it, and that's who I was. I still live in a beach town. Right now I'm living in a beach town where I don't wear shoes, so not too much has changed. But all I mean to say is that I thought that it was cool to not have money. I thought that made me more of a traveler. I thought that it made me more authentic. That's awesome. That's where I was in my process, and all of that was great. So for many, many years, and at the same time, some of my friends were meeting their wives and starting a family and buying property and investing money and staying in hotels, as an example. And it didn't interest me for 1 second. For me, I was always just like, go back to Canada, work a couple months, save some money. When can I go traveling next? What's the next place that I can go to? What's the next experience that I can have? And it never bothered me. For example, when I was in my early 20s, I did a trip in South America, all of it by bus. So I started in Argentina in sort of I started in Cordoba, and I went by bus all the way to the top of Colombia or Ecuador. I just did, and I did the whole thing by bus. And to me, that was the coolest thing. And I loved having overnight buses because then I wouldn't have to pay for a room. And that's like, to me, that was at the time, that was the coolest thing that one could be doing. And looking back, it was an amazing experience, which meant so much to me. And then I started my business, Conscious Counsel, and I went through life and money was never important to me. So full stop. When I was in law school, I had a lot of friends who were super driven, and all they wanted to do was find a high-paying job in law. And to me, that didn't really matter. I never thought like, oh, awesome. Once I have this piece of paper, now I can go sit in an office and do all of these things. It was important to me to get trained. So the thing to know also about money is it's like your life is going and your money story is going with you. And essentially for a long period of time, for many, many, many years, money was never important to me, and I didn't care about it. And I actually thought that it wasn't a good thing. I never had a priority to save or to anything like that. I was always just like, I just need enough money to be able to take my next trip. That was my mindset for a long time. And then a really interesting thing happened. For the first time in my life, I started doing therapy. And when I was living in Vancouver and working with a lawyer, it was time for me to start having these conversations. And obviously, when you're in therapy, you talk about your relationship with your family and some of your first memories. And I had a really, really crazy moment that I even have goosebumps right now that I recount or share about, where I was talking about something with my therapist, and I just randomly brought up this memory that I had as a child when the tooth fairy, I don't know if that's a Canadian thing or maybe it's global, where I remember I lost my first tooth, and my parents put a $5 bill under my pillow. So I woke up, the tooth was gone, and there were $5. And you'd think most kids would be like super stoked and like, oh my God, I'm going to the candy store or the Promenade Mall, for example. Shout out to Thornhill for those who get the reference. But instead, I remember going into my parents' room and crying and feeling really bad that they had given me this money and that I thought that we as a family wouldn't have enough. I gave it back to them. I was like, no, we're not going to have enough. You should take this. And that was buried so deep inside of me. I never ever would have uncovered it unless I was doing the work in therapy to bring it up. And that was like a really, really big first clue that I had, where I was like, oh, this is what my relationship with money is. I don't think that there's enough. There's some sense of scarcity around it. And I'm really scared. And I want my family to be okay. And so at that point, that was like the first step in my process of understanding, like, oh, how do I view money? How does it look like to me? And all of these things. And then the next really, really important piece, okay, I started Conscious Counsel. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never ran a business before. So I've never worked with an accountant. I've never had a bookkeeper. I don't know any of this stuff. Sort of like the money comes in, I'm like, oh, cool. Like now I can get to keep traveling, right? It's that still was always my thing. And I was living in Brazil, in Caraíva. And at the time I was living with a girlfriend. And this was the first time that I had had a girlfriend in a long time. And when she and I broke up, basically when I was living in this town at that time, I was living at her place. She rented a place for the year. And I was basically, I moved in with her, which looking back probably was not the best decision for the relationship, but everything happens for a reason. And then essentially when we broke up, the bulk of the fights that she and I had were around money. She wasn't working. She wasn't interested in working. She had her own life. She had her own priorities, which is awesome. All of these things. And at that point, like I was in Conscious Counsel and going, but not really at the next level. But it was just like all of the fights or disagreements in our relationship always came down to money. And I remember that we broke up. I left her house. And I remember like as I was standing outside the gate to her place, I said to myself, I will never, ever, ever be in a position that I do not have money again. So that I am fighting about money or that money is a stress in my relationship. That will never, ever happen. And I think the second point to bring up about financial abundance and mindset, first is that, okay, yeah, all of it's in our mind and it's our money story that's running us. And secondly, it's so important that like you really have to need to want to change. That's what I've noticed in my life around fitness, around work, around finances. There has to be a real deep desire within you to make a change. And there has to be a breaking point where you're like, never again. This will never, ever happen to me again. And basically, when I was standing outside the gate and I said, this will never happen to me again. That I have to fight about money, that I'm in a relationship that we're fighting about money. And then I started speaking to some of my friends who were really successful. And now for the first time, I don't remember how old I was. Maybe I was 33, maybe I was 34, something like that. For the first time, I cared. I cared about making money. I cared about living in financial abundance. And I spoke to some of my friends, and I was just like, hey, what books do you have on personal finance or things that will help? And this is really where the process changed for me. And there were two books in particular that made the biggest difference for me. One of them is called a book called Worth It by Amanda Steinberg. And the other was Money and the Law of Attraction by Esther and Jerry Hicks. And I basically went on a journey. So those were the two principal ones, but I went on a journey for about 6 months where all I did was read books about money mindset and personal finance and abundance. That's all that I did. I didn't do any, I worked, I was living in Caraíva, so I would go swimming in the river with my dog and hang out with friends and dance forró and whatever. I'm living my life, but all of my time and attention went into reading and studying these materials. And I'll very briefly go over what some of the books talk about, but I'm not an expert in this. And really the point of me sharing all of this is I just want to point and push you in the direction that if you want to make a change in your life, read and study. That's what I'll say. It's not innate talent. I wasn't able to get to financial abundance and financial freedom because I'm a really smart guy and I work hard, blah, none of that. Everything in my life changed once I started studying and reading these books and rewriting my story. And so like, it's a different type of work than they teach us about. Obviously they teach us, oh, your work should be that you go to school and get a degree and then you work for a company and then do this and all that. Firstly, I know so many people who were super high qualified lawyers who did not live in financial abundance and all they had was stress. Who knows, whatever decisions they make, whatever programming they have. But I really cannot stress enough that the work that is required is to connect and read resources and study people who have done this and people who know this and people who can give you the tips and the tricks and the tools. And basically the big one for me was Worth It by Amanda Steinberg. And I've actually I've read it 3 times, and each time I've read it at a point where I was like, my finances, I wasn't in a great position. There was the first time, and then I read that, and I also read, obviously Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read Bob Proctor, You Were Born Rich. I think The Psychology of Money. It was just all of these. I would just look, this is all I read. I dove deep. That's sort of my personality also. But starting with Worth It by Amanda Steinberg, it's funny because it's a book written for women. Her story is that she was, married and then got divorced and had nothing and had to create everything from nothing, even though she was, a really intelligent entrepreneur. But she realized that her money story was running her life. And there was something about this book that just resonated so deeply with me. And I did all of the exercises, I did all of the practices that were required in the book, and it just absolutely changed. And I realized that for so long, my money story was like, oh, I'm a traveler, having money is bad. I remembered that story from my childhood. And I just rewrote a new money story. I just wrote a new money story of living in abundance and there being enough. And maybe you'll believe me or maybe you won't, but this, I'm telling you sincerely, this was the moment that changed everything for me. It was just that tipping point of having the awareness of what my story used to be, having the tools to rewrite my story, and then reinforcing my new story on a daily basis. And I'll never forget, I was in Caraíva, and this was after I had separated from my girlfriend and moved out, and it was Carnival. And Carnival is like the big party time when everyone goes crazy and dances and there's lots of beautiful people and super fun. And I remember I took a pousada like outside of the town, and all I did was read all day long. I just read every day. I was just devouring these materials. And slowly what started to happen was that I built up a new money story, and then everything started to change. Everything started to change. New opportunities came. I never could have predicted how things would change, but slowly but surely I would set financial goals and I'd say, okay, by this date I want this amount, and I would hit it. And then by this date I want this amount. And it's like a switch. There was a switch that changed in my mind where it was like, oh, now I really want to have money and I want to have financial freedom. Like, okay, the universe is like, okay, cool. Now let me bring that to you. And so it started happening. And I want to emphasize as well that these are constant daily habits that I'm doing on a daily basis. There's obviously my work, but I could have been doing the same work and I would have been earning what I was earning, or I would have been in the same financial situation. And if I didn't change my money story, the success that I've had wouldn't have come to me. I firmly, really, really believe that. And the next thing that I want to say that's really important is that it's an ongoing process. So even this morning, before I sat down and recorded this, and I was, as an example, an exercise of something that I do when I want to call in money, because now it's coming up to the end of the year and I want to hit my financial goals, I'll just take 10 minutes and write down all of the times that I wanted and needed money and money came to me. Or amazing months that I had in my business. Oh, I remember this month when we made this many sales and these are all the things that came to me and this is how easy it was. And remembering for me that it's not like I'm not the one who has to make it happen. I just have to be the one to allow it to happen. So I want to emphasize as well that it's an ongoing process. And what's really cool, what's really interesting, let's say, and I finished reading a book that's called The Mountain Is You. I think that's the name of it, and I forget the name of the author, but it's a fantastic book about self-sabotage and understanding human behavior. And one thing they talk about, that the author, Brianna West, her name is Brianna West. One thing Brianna West talks about in the book is that human beings are programmed for comfort. So the hardest part about breaking your money story is that you've had decades of living in that money story and believing all of those beliefs. So changing it is an ongoing process with continuous habits. And what's so interesting for me is what I've noticed in my personal journey is there was that major big shift at the start. Okay, and now things have changed, and now I'm used to having money, and now I'm investing in real estate, or I'm investing in ETFs and bonds, or whatever it is that I'm doing. But you also have to get used to living in financial abundance. You have to get used to it. And what's interesting for me is I know that my progression feels like this, like it goes up and then it plateaus. And then I need to do the work again, and then it goes up and then it plateaus. And then it goes up and it plateaus. But it's a never-ending process, at least for me. And I think that's something that's really important to remember as well, because you're going to do this work, you're going to have these resources, and then you're going to get to a point where you're like, oh, cool. Like it's not like, oh, now it's done and I've got a great money story. You have to continually reinforce it. And so one of the most helpful tools that I find in terms of a habit, sort of like I mentioned, is you have to notice the success that you have, and you have to become aware of it. Because if what you're focusing is on things that don't work, then your mind's just going to keep focusing on like, oh, that didn't work, and I wasn't able to pay that bill, or I couldn't reach that goal, or I couldn't do this. And even however small the gains are or are going to be, you just have to mention them. Like I just have a list of evidence of financial abundance. In my phone, I have a list that's called evidence of financial abundance. And what's amazing is like, I don't delete anything. So I remember what financial abundance used to look like for me and what financial abundance looks like for me now. But anytime that something happens that represents that financial abundance, I always put a note in. And anytime that maybe I'm feeling upset or down, or maybe if I have lack consciousness means that I don't think there's enough, or the economy is doing very poorly, so now I'm not going to be able to meet my goals. Anytime any thought like that enters, I just overflow and flood it with proof of financial abundance that I've had in my life. And so in sort of wrapping everything up, I just want to share, again, I'll do a summary sort of everything that I spoke about, but I cannot emphasize enough that it's a game. This is just a game that we're playing. We're in this world, we're playing a game, and we are really in control of the game. And you have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind, and your subconscious mind is running your money story until you intervene and until you get awareness. For me, that first step was realizing that as a child, I was afraid of money. I believed in lack consciousness. I didn't think that there was enough for everyone, for enough to go around. And then the real turning point for me was like when I decided to never be in that position again. I made a decision. I just decided. I will never, ever, ever be without money in a relationship or for myself again. I'll always have the freedom to do what I want. And that's the work. Just think about planting a seed. I was with my friend last night in the park. I was like begging. I was like, please don't tell me about the new opportunity, and just go spend 3 months and read for an hour every day these materials and watch what happens. Watch what's going to happen and come into your life, because I really believe that. So just think about all of this as a seed. The seed is your unconscious belief or your money story that you have. And there's a current seed that is in your brain. And what you want to do is plant a new seed and foster and water that new seed and take care of it as best as you can. So basically, in summary, for all of this, my belief and, a different way of looking at financial abundance, instead of me saying, go work 3 jobs, what I'm saying is that the different approach is work on your money mindset, work on your mind, work on your story, study resources, get excited, get about it, make a decision that whatever goals you have that you're going to achieve and that you refuse to settle for anything else. So the big thing is that the work is your mindset. I shared a little bit about my story and how there was something from my childhood And then there was a decision that I made. And most importantly, resources. This is really all about resources. It's not me, Cory. I was not born into the world with any sort of gift of attracting money and being in financial abundance. Everything came from studying and reading books. And you're going to find that some books resonate. Maybe you pick up Worth It and you read 10 minutes of it and you think, nope, not for me. Awesome. You're in Amazon, other books like this, just keep going. That's what I'm always doing. I'm always just trying, because if there's one piece of information that can help in any of those books, that can be the difference between a financial abundance, living the life of your dreams, having what you want versus not. So also in terms of habits and practices, it's a daily habit. We're constantly leveling up as human beings. Sometimes we're not comfortable when we make that change to a new level and we want to go back. But the important thing is when you're in that level, that's when you have to reinforce the beliefs and get comfortable and realize that you're doing something different and that you're comfortable in the way that you feel. And then lastly, just to summarize, I think the most important point is that money is not going to make you happy. Being rich is not happiness. What's happiness is fulfillment, it's satisfaction, it's having fun, it's being a valuable member to society, it's supporting other people, it's building a community, it's being part of a community, it's making a difference in the lives of other people. When you have money and you're not worried about money, you have a much better chance to be the best version of yourself, to have as big of an impact as possible in those other areas. And that's what I want for all of us. That's what I want for myself. That's what I want for anyone who's listening to this, for my community, for my friends, for my family. And the sooner that one can realize that, everything in life becomes easier. Your priorities shift. You understand what's important. I don't want money to show it off or that people think that I'm a certain way. I'm a very modest person, and I think I'm certain I'll always remain modest. But really, money's a tool to make the world a better place, and it's also a tool to make your life easier, and it's a tool, most importantly, to give you freedom. And freedom for me is the thing that I value most of everything in my life. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that this was helpful. In the show notes, I'm going to include a list of some of the different resources that I mentioned or other books that have been really helpful for me. And if you want, you can email me. It's the email address is holler@littlebitdifferentpodcast, and share a financial goal. Create something, share with me, shoot me a note. Have a wonderful day, and don't forget to stay different.